So we are presenting on behalf of a three-way collaboration between Lions, Greenway Architects and Architecture Associates, and start with acknowledging the country that we're presenting on and indeed the project is built on, the lands of the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people, and we pay as a team our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and any other First Nations people that are here in the audience today. The project is really a narrative about how to eke out a small but significant piece of public architecture within the space of the city. And the story really begins with the so-called Yarra building at Federation Square, where about 7 or 8 years ago, all of us were involved with moving the Coogee Heritage Trust into the top floor of the building, where they were literally like a tenant, commercial, what Fed Square viewed as a commercial building, but nevertheless the Trust were at the time extremely ambitious about how they might occupy the building and asked us to speculate about how they could make the building more connected into the space and the culture of the city, and more particularly into the space of Burrarung, which obviously holds great significance to the community. So they asked us to look at these drawings, and we did quite a lot of work on that, about how the project can reinforce the importance of Indigenous knowledge at the centre of the contemporary city, but also to look at how the idea of country and landscapes, particularly Burrarung, which is a chain of ponds, as well as the river, could also be reflected back into the Federation Square and into the design itself. So it was about connecting the square with the river, which has always been problematic, and also about using the space between Dyke Falls and Yarra Falls, where it's located, to start to connect the idea of Indigenous culture with ecologies. Our work was, it says, heavily disrupted by this little episode in the public discourse of the city about what is public architecture, and from great work by many people to rally around that idea, that was eventually led, as you would know, to the buildings being heritage listed, and indeed complete change from Fed Square being a sort of commercial enterprise to MEPCO, which is like cultural enterprise. So we were able to return to these drawings and really think about the project as a public architectural cultural project, and for the building, if they occupy all of the building, to really take space alongside ACME and NGV as a three-way split of cultural enterprise, but more importantly bringing Indigenous cultural enterprise directly into the heart of the city. And that included, given we were working within our heritage building, not that old, to create stronger connections between Fed Square and the space of Burrarung, and wherever possible, again within constraints, to open up the project into the space of the city. I'll just keep doing a dramatic push of the button and see if that...
Go down.
Husband Dougie, what about with the mouse? That helps.
Okay. So without following the introduction for Jeeva talk through the project in more detail. So the main transition is from the Trust being effectively tenants, mostly in the top level of the building, a small occupation of the ground level to basically the entire building. And to sort of summarise where it got to, through the Trust's advocacy, the building is no longer the Yarra building, it's the Burrarung building. Instead of having their name as a tenant on the pylon out the front, the whole building is now a KHT building, and at that point we're going to take you through the front door.
So picking up on the metaphor of the scar tree around ecological practice and understanding the cultural meanings of this place has been really important, so the connection from the river to the bank, but also the ecological considerations of how we think about caring for country has been really pivotal. Repurposing materials, we use spotted gum throughout to create this figure as part of this textural quality and sort of tactility of the experience within the interior space. And then also understanding the cultural practices and certainly things like, there's no dots down here in the southeast, so really looking at the chevron pattern and the relationship to the scar tree as mnemonic markers in the landscape as you start to move your way through the space. Importantly, thinking about things like the blossoms of the eucalypt, the sap from the river red gum, again, it becomes the sort of codifier of the cultural meaning and the colour treatment and material choices. Certainly centering that relationality of country has been a certain key driver in terms of how we think about those chain of ponds as a way of sort of navigating the movement patterns and the intuitive wayfinding. You can see spatially as we come through from the entry into this more communal space, where children from schools come to quite often, look out the spaces and really engage with the cultural experience. You can see that sort of movement pattern of how we sort of engage and pull people through the space, and certainly reconnecting to the Birrarung, the river of mists and shadows, and the figure in the ceiling as a way of echoing that movement of water and that connectivity. And then you can see as we start to move from the concierge desk, which is really using that material, pulling you up the escalators. You can either go up to the gallery spaces or into the community spaces to the left. You can see this figure in terms of those communal connections and really showcasing culture. You're enveloped by the cultural collection of which the Trust is the custodians. And then you can see these gathering spaces, these pause points are really important. And then you can see how we're starting to really engage with the colour and the movement. And then the key points of connection are really these spaces where people come together. Sorry, this is very frustrating.
Go scroll.
And you can see through here how we start to really unify and peel back those layers, different purposes. You can see here as we move to the upper floor, two really significant gallery spaces, and the space between as well is really important. That connectivity really unifies the idea. Coming up, we're seeing this relationship here to the manor gum as part of the expression of welcomed onto country. You can see those movement and opening in those apertures to the river. The cultural collection is really important as part of the experience, showcasing and celebrating culture, connecting back to the square, certainly. Those mnemonic markers as the wayfinding intuitive movement patterns, again connecting to the treetops through and orientating oneself to country. And importantly, you can see the colour as a signifier of the importance and the lifeblood of the river, and so that becomes a really important motif. But significantly too, this is by, for and with community, so Indigenous supply chain from design, construction, key contractors, artwork, installation, Indigenous client has been a really important element. And so while we might have had some lack of success from the referendum last year, this is what Yes looks like in terms of the context of architecture signifying the importance of how we embrace our shared humanity and culture.
Yeah.